Alright, so I'm starting off with cream paints, a body crayon, which I don't even use, wedge sponges, because if you use a brush with the liquid latex, then the liquid latex will ruin your brush. So I'm starting out by taking some cream paint on a Q-tip, and I'm just like giving a very general outline of where I think I want this wound to appear. You don't need to color it in this part. I just had extra cream paint around the edges, so I decided to blend it out. Blend it toward the middle so it doesn't show on the outer part, because the middle is going to be covered up anyway. So now we're going to start with a base of liquid latex just on the whole area that you want covered. We're doing this so we can peel it off later, and it's a lot easier, and it'll actually stay together as a prosthetic that you can reuse. So then you want to overlay your Q-tip. My Q-tip was too big, so I broke it down, and then I proceeded to pull out the cotton end of it, so it won't be so clumpy and bulky where we attach it. Then we're going to just take some liquid latex on our sponge and dab it on there to fasten the Q-tip to our hand. You don't want to use too much liquid latex in this step because it will take it a while to dry. I found that it's better to use little bits, thin layers of liquid latex and wait for them to dry rather than use one big layer, because it's going to take forever for it to dry. So right here I'm just taking a cotton ball, just a standard cotton ball, and I've pulled it apart to create little wispy cotton ball strands, and I'm dunking it in the latex and just saturating it in latex. And we're using this to build up our wound and add texture to our wound. And again, this is going to help it peel off better at the end, so it's actually going to be a prosthetic that you can reuse. So I'm just doing this again with another Q-tip, and I'm laying it on my hand about where it looks like the tendons are on my hand. And I'm going to do this a third time on the other side of the Q-tip. And again, you're just saturating it in liquid latex. I chose to put the cottony part at the top, more toward my knuckles on this one, because the other two were at the bottom, and I didn't want that to get too thick to where it bulks up and it's just really difficult to work with and smooth out. So now I'm just building up more wound, giving it more texture. I'm starting to build up the wall. Here, I call it the wall, but it's really just the edge of my flesh, I guess. So during this part, I have one of the areas covered, and I slowed down the video so you can actually see that I'm pulling the liquid latex cotton thing up to create more of a ridge, so it looks like my flesh was ripped there. That's just an easy way to do it. I just took my fingers and I pinched it. You don't want the liquid latex and cotton to be super wet. You want it to be kind of dry, so it doesn't just completely pull off into your fingers, but you don't want it to be tacky like spirit gum, because then it won't move, really. So you want it to be somewhere in the middle, and then you just keep working, and I built up the edges all the way around, and now I'm just kind of blending it out into my hand more. On several occasions, you see my finger kind of smooth out the edges. That just blends it into the skin more and gives it a less liquidy latex kind of look. Go back and fill in gaps where you see that it's needed, as you see fit, really. I took a pencil here to get into finer parts of the hand where I couldn't reach with my fingers. While the liquid latex was still kind of wet, I just moved it around to really like accentuate any little details I wanted. Then I went back and I tapped around the edges to smooth it out even more, because you really don't want it to be super lumpy, especially around the edges. So now we're blow drying my hand because I want it to be dry so I can move on with this video. You don't have to blow dry your hand. If you just want to sit there and wait for it to dry, that's fine. It's not my problem. So I went in with red cream paint on a Q-tip, and I'm just filling in between the Q-tips. Be careful in this step to stay off of the edges you built up. You just want it in between the Q-tips and the edges. I'm filling it in with red very generously. I go back in and I put black around the edges. The black helps give it the illusion that blood's clotted there, and it just really helps add depth to your painting, and it really helps to sell it. So don't be afraid to put lots of black in there. We're going to cover this up with stage blood later. Anyway, it just kind of gives it a nice base in case you didn't want to do that. You could also use water-based paints here, or alcohol-activated paints. It doesn't really matter. I just chose cream paints because they're cheaper, a lot cheaper than water-activated and alcohol-activated paints. The only downside to cream paints is they stick to liquid latex really well, but they tend to rub off on clothes, so be cautious with that. Now I've taken a Q-tip with some other paints, other cream paints from my bruise wheel. It's the same wheel. I'll put a link to it in the description and everything else I used. And I'm using yellow, brown, red, and black around the edges of the hand we've created, just as I see fit. I'm trying to blend it as much as possible just by tapping it in to the other colors. I'm not mixing Q-tips, like I'm using one Q-tip for yellow and one for brown and one for black, just so I can keep my colors pretty steady. Now, it was at this point when Ben told me that my hand was looking like a rainbow, and he went to go get my foundation so I could cover it in foundation and make it look more convincing. So I just took a couple little squirts of my foundation, and I'm just blending it around, like over top of the cream paints. The cream paints just act as a base here, and the foundation is really helping to sell it. And then I decided that I covered too much of my bruise up, so I ripped apart a wedge sponge and I dipped it in the black cream paint, and I just kind of dabbed it around until it gave me the bruised effect that I wanted. So now, final step, finally, I'm going in with the stage, scab blood, whatever you want to call it, and I took a little bit and I put it in one of the gaps between the Q-tips, and I'm blending it around with another Q-tip so it's not all just staying in one place. You want to vary how much goes in each little section. You don't want to put a constant amount across the thing. You want it to have depth and texture. So, as you can see, putting black around the edges really helped it to scab up. You can also get this effect by putting more stage and scab blood just in that area. So yeah, thing with the stage blood is the brand that I use doesn't dry. It'll still be runny and moist. So avoid getting that on your clothes. Most of the time it washes out, but there's still the chance that it doesn't wash out and leaves a big old red stain. That's a word of warning with the liquid latex too. You can buy liquid latex that's nice and it comes out if you get it in time, but if you want to opt for the cheaper liquid latex like I do, I recommend that you get some cheap clothes that you don't really mind messing up, or you wear a smock, because it'll get on your clothes and your clothes will just feel rubbery and gross and have these weird circles. And so now I decided that I wanted to put scab blood, stage blood, whatever, around the wound, just to sell it a little bit more, because you know the blood's not all going to stay within the wound. You're going to get some on your skin and whatever. So I'm just putting it over the cream paints we did for bruising, just dabbing it around the edges, again, where I think it's needed. Don't be afraid to get in there and really stab your hand with it. Maybe you'll draw some real blood and it'll sell the look even more. I don't know, whatever you want to do. Just kind of make sure that your hand's well covered, especially in the wound. I put a lot of bruising at the bottom of my hand, so I put a lot more stage blood at the bottom of my hand than I did at the top. I go back here in a minute and I dab it around at the top. I made sure that the white Q-tips were covered well because it was inside of our hand, so they're not going to be perfect and pretty and white. And so that's the finished product. That's how you use liquid latex to create an opened wound on your hand or just wherever else.